This episode is powered by Act Now Education. Go to www.actnoweducation.com for free comprehensive educational resources and opportunities for active duty, veterans, military spouses, and children.
And once you figure out where your space is, you use a different tool. So project management is the right tool in the complicated space. Scrum is the right tool in the complex space where you've got to do some experimentation and inspection and adaptation. So it just depends on where your interest is.
Warriors fall in. It's time for formation. Today, we're joined with a 24-year Navy combat veteran who worked his military career in various positions and was deployed to Afghanistan as a military intelligence analyst. Now, as a civilian, our guest today has worked for a number of highly successful businesses such as Carnival Cruise Line, Verizon, and IBM Cloud. We're joined today with Tim Dickey, who's going to talk to us about Scrum, which is a framework for agile software development. Now, some of you listening or watching might have seen this term used for different training and certifications out there. Well, today, Tim is going to help us better understand what it is and just let everyone know the term Scrum comes from the formation of players in rugby that emphasize teamwork. The term itself is quite interesting. So what's even more fascinating is what it means and what it stands for and how it could positively affect your own career. So Tim, thank you for joining us on the Morning Formation, sir.
Hey, my pleasure, KP. I'm glad that I get to talk Scrum, which is one of my passions.
Yeah, well, I could definitely tell you've pretty much achieved the highest standard out there, being a Scrum Master. What in the heck is Scrum, and how can we simplify the definition so that folks who are hearing this term for the first time truly understand what it is?
Well, you hit the nail on the head with a leadoff. It's a framework, and it's extended beyond software development. So now it's actually considered product development as well as service development. So it's gone mainstream, if you will. So it started in the software community, and now people talk Scrum, and they talk the broader umbrella term agile. And specific to the framework, Scrum itself is really for solving complex problems. It's when teams don't know what the solution is, let alone what the problem is. And to contrast that with traditional project management a little bit, traditional project management, and I think we'll get into this a little bit deeper, it is a little bit better geared toward the complicated domain. The problem's known, but the solutions are, kind of in question. So Scrum is really very experimental. And as a framework, it's very open as well. So it gives you the lowest amount of overhead you can possibly get with 3 accountabilities, which is the team, a product owner, and a Scrum Master, along with 5 separate events. And events are meetings, within this big Scrum container, which is number 1. You've got a daily meeting, which is your planning session. You've also got a sprint planning meeting, which is the duration of time that you're working, and it can be as short as 1 week to upwards of 4 weeks. They want to keep the cycle very tight. And then you've got a sprint review where you actually demonstrate the work that you've done over the course of your sprint. And that's the developers as well as stakeholders and customers coming together and talking through the work and showing it, something as simple as a design to as complex as actual functionality or an actual mock-up of the product. And then you've got a sprint review, which is really the team assessing its own performance and figuring out what worked, what didn't work, and what can be improved. And then you've got 3 artifacts coming out of Scrum. And they're really simple, which is a backlog, which is a huge consolidated list of all the things that you want to build, along with a sprint backlog, which is a shorter list of the things that you're going to focus on. And everything is about value. So, the product owner and the team negotiate and they go, okay, these are the things we want to work on because these are the highest value pieces of work. And at the end of it, you get an increment. And an increment is really something useful. It could, like I said, it could be actual functionality within software. It could be a great design. It could be a model. If you're using Scrum to develop a car, and actually that has happened. So, again, it's this 3-5-3. And so you can tell I just rattled this off from memory. So whatever goes on beyond that is really about team practices and about team adaptation. You can plug just about anything you want into it. There's nothing prescriptive about how you work as a team. And that's kind of the joy of it. So you really get to experiment and adapt. And again, this is complex work. It's just figuring out what's going to work, what doesn't. If it does work, keep doing it. And if it fails at some point in the future, go back and start anew. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It sounds just as fascinating as project management. And I actually have my MBA in project management, and I didn't quite realize the value of those types of certifications when it comes to the overall efficiency and effectiveness, because many folks don't realize, I can tell you that from the project management side of things, that many of us do projects and we do project management. So I would imagine with Scrum, there's a lot of things that we do and we just don't realize that the tactics that we're using are Scrum related. But it really helps formulate and understand what we're doing to a science. And that, when I did my research before our interview here, that's kind of what I gathered as far as what Scrum is. And I just want to ask, Tim, is Scrum training and certification something that is new, or has it been around for some time?
It's been around for some time. In fact, the organization that I'm certified through, they were established in 2009. And it was as a result of one of the co-creators of the Scrum Guide, kind of looking at it and saying, we really need to have a rigorous and even standard by which to judge professional Scrum practitioners. And so there's actually 3 different certifying organizations out there, Scrum Alliance being one. The core curriculum and content is actually developed by the trainer, him or herself. So there's not a whole lot of standardization. You can go to one of those courses and be competent in the knowledge of Scrum. You can do what I did, going through scrum.org, and a little bit rigorous standard testing, large question, and rigorously vetted. And there's a community of professional Scrum trainers who are actually curating content, and they're improving it, literally every single year. And so that's the route I chose. And I'll tell you a little bit more about how I got there. And then there's also Scrum Inc. And so the gentleman who founded scrum.org is Ken Schwaber. Scrum Inc. was founded by his co-author, Jeff Sutherland. And Scrum Inc., same basic foundation along with Scrum Alliance. It's all based on the Scrum Guide, which was previewed at a software development conference in 1995 here in Austin, Texas. And I live in Dallas, so it's all relative and close by for me. So that goal, that desire to make Scrum into a professional set of accountabilities and practices, it began in earnest because there was that recognition that this needed to be a little bit more rigorous, a little bit more well-formed, a little bit better organized. And I think it's really taken off from there. And the community continues to grow. In fact, I know scrum.org has a bunch of metrics for the number of people who are certified through the different levels of certification. And I happen to be in that midway point. The next step is becoming a professional Scrum Master level 3, which is a written exam. And trust me, I'm having to pay a lot of time and focus getting to that point where I can do my written exam, because it's 2 hours, 10 questions, and it's a lot of actual practical experience and applying the Scrum values, as well as the basic mechanics of how you coach and assist your team to be successful in getting something useful out the door.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a great way to gauge your overall effectiveness when it comes to teamwork and um, project building, project completion. And it's kind of funny, Tim, because Scrum is something that I've seen a lot of buzz about, Scrum certification, Scrum training. And I just didn't know what it was. And I kind of felt dumb. Like maybe I should know what this is, and I don't know what it is. I kind of was getting an idea just seeing some of the posts out there. So there was a lot of buzz, and that kind of talks to the idea of what you just said about the growth of getting Scrum certified. Just want to ask you, is there different levels to Scrum certifications, and what are they?
Yeah. So within scrum.org, you've got 3 tiers of certification, specifically in the Scrum Master's accountability. You've got the same thing in the product owner's accountability. And in the developer's accountability, I want to say there's only one, but developers are such smart people. It's like they come in with mad skills and, all kinds of, certifications from Microsoft and from Amazon. And, you name it. They walk in, they're like fully loaded. Guys like me and like you, me being a recovering program / project manager, coming in, it's like, yeah, I needed to bring some credibility. And in addition, there's a number of ancillary and complementary certifications, like professional Scrum with Kanban, single certification, professional Scrum with user experience, another single certification. And the list goes on. And if you're really interested in it and you want to geek out, go to scrum.org online. And they've got a beautiful web page that explains all of it.
Yeah, you actually gave me a few of those links as well, and I'll make sure that I post those down in the show notes as well, so anyone out there listening can further do research on that. And Tim, with you being a military veteran yourself, who would you say Scrum is for?
Well, it's for anybody and everybody. It doesn't really matter what your background is. And I think the veterans community in particular is really well suited because, we improvise, overcome, and adapt. I mean, that's what we're trained to do. And that's exactly what Scrum enables teams to do. It's to look at an obstacle and say, hey, we got to figure out a way around this. Let's put our heads together and let's get thinking.
Yeah, I definitely can tell you that from even I keep talking about project management because that's my background experience, but even from a project management background, I can attest to the idea that once you truly understand what you're doing in terms of tactics and efficiency and effectiveness, it really ups your game as far as getting the proper project done in the right amount of time to meet your schedule and overall purpose. So, and with that being said, we've spoken on this podcast about project management, and I hate to say that word over and over again when we're talking about Scrum, but on previous episodes, we have talked about that. So how does Scrum compare to project management, or is that even a proper comparison?
I think that there's 2 schools of thought, and it really goes back to understanding what space you're operating in. Complexity over here, complicated over here. There's a great thing I use to help orient people called the Cynefin framework. A big shout out to Dave Snowden for this. And once you figure out where your space is, you use a different tool. So project management is the right tool in the complicated space. Scrum is the right tool in the complex space where you've got to do some experimentation and inspection and adaptation. So it just depends on where your interest is. If you're one of these really well organized and very thorough and think through everything and you just love the planning cadence, nothing wrong with going into project management. In fact, I would not want to try and build a bridge using Scrum. There's no need. 0, 0, 0, 100%. I never do it. However, if I'm going to say build a Tesla for the first time, I would rather use Scrum. I'd rather use this iterative process and do a series of smaller experiments that build on one another. And that's where Scrum really, and by the way, I can't tell you whether Elon used Scrum as a way of developing his automobiles. But it makes sense given that he helped co-create PayPal, which is a web-based software system. He may have encouraged his teams to use Scrum as their basis until they got to that stage where they could move to the Toyota production system way of working. I don't know, but it's this stuff where it's like, man, we don't really even understand the problem, and we really don't understand the solution, but we know how to experiment in the scientific method, and let's see what we get from there. And then, more important, let's get it in front of our customers, in front of our stakeholders quickly, so that we can get their feedback and see if we're close, if we're completely on base, or if we're really skewed off to the left or the right.
No, I think your example makes a lot of sense. Building a bridge versus building an electric vehicle for the first time. It definitely underlines the idea that Scrum is something that you might want to use when you're venturing into an unknown frontier, and you have to do various experiments versus a definite, because we all know engineering throughout the years, we know how to build bridges. But especially in today's world with what's coming out with the internet and green energy and things like that, there's so many frontiers in industries that we're getting into. We just don't know until we get there and we experiment, we try it out. And Scrum sounds like it would be a definite certificate that you would get to elevate your career. How do you think our veteran community can benefit from getting certified to become a Scrum Master, or to get certified even at the basic level of Scrum, or just Scrum training in general, Tim?
I think that it's a worthwhile pursuit, and I think it's complementary. I think that any veteran should consider both. Consider project management and understand the lens that project management looks through, and then get the Scrum certifications and understand the lens that Scrum is looking through. And I dare say, there's a point where, and I haven't seen it yet seamlessly happen, but it does happen where you get good overlap, where, I would say in the hardware space, like, building out cloud, we used a lot of the things that I adapted from Scrum in order to build out cloud. Especially going into the pandemic, we were finishing a build cycle at IBM of 4 cloud site expansions, and we had to pivot. We really had to figure out how we could at least try and maintain our schedule, with the understanding that we were going to have to do a lot of different logistical moves that we had not planned for, because stuff was on back order and stuff got stranded, and you name it. But the team came together. We thought through some of the challenges very iteratively. We put our strategy on paper, and then we adjusted as we went along. And we were always using the word forecast, because there was that high degree of uncertainty. We knew what the desired outcome was, but we really didn't know how we were going to achieve it. And that's the brilliance of Scrum is, nobody tells the team how to do the work. They determine that on their own, because they're closest to it.
That makes a lot of sense, because I can tell you, as a leader, that's the kind of leader that I am. I would rather prefer to get the insight and innovativeness coming from the team versus me telling them exactly how to do things. And that Scrum sounds absolutely fascinating to me. Then, Tim, at this point, I want to pivot the conversation and give you an opportunity to talk about your own military career transition out of the Navy, because I understand that you spent some time in the reserves and on combat deployments as well. So would you mind talking to our listeners a little bit about some of your experiences?
Yeah, sure. I started in the submarine community on active duty, and riding around on nuclear powered sewer tubes. Nuclear powered boats was a wonderful and certainly eye-opening experience. I actually was part of the commissioning crew of the USS Wyoming, SSBN 742. So the ship celebrated its 25th anniversary here. I think it was last summer. I went, maybe this is not really where I want to make a career of it. And I determined that, after 6 years and doing cool things there, and even more so being introduced to the special operations community on my first submarine. That it was like I had a good lifetime of active duty, and left active duty, took advantage of the Navy College Fund, which was a thing back when I left, and I've got a little bit of gray in my beard, and stayed in the reserve, and so I did the dual career route. Graduated from college, got hired on as a systems manager for Carnival Cruise Lines, working on the cruise ships, and made some really good career moves that complemented both what I was doing in the private sector in IT and what the needs of the at that point the Coast Guard Reserve and then subsequently the Navy Reserve wanted from me. And so I went on a set of extended orders at Special Operations Command South, because that was the command I was supporting. I was in knowledge management, doing SharePoint configuration, and it was great because I had pulled my private sector experience into the military. There was a definite need there. Was happy to be on staff, and ran that through to becoming a DoD contractor for a period of time. And I answered the call. As an enlisted leader, I felt kind of convicted asking my sailors to go deploy. I wasn't doing it myself, and so I did 2 rotations in Afghanistan. Boots on the ground, doing my job. First time was helping declassified detainee files, and then the second time around was supporting a Special Operations Joint Task Force. The super cool guys, and honing my skills in my trade in the military. So I was leveraging my civilian experience in all that IT stuff and making great stuff happen systems wise, while doing all the intel analytics as well. So I got the benefit of both worlds, and solved a number of problems, and even put together a process that outlived me in that second deployment, where one of the guys in my unit came back and he said, "Chief, I can't believe it. You made my 16-hour job into an 8-hour job, and I was bored the rest of the day." I was like, "Well, sir, between you and me, I'm just glad that the process outlived me. That the data mining and everything else worked in it, and it worked so well that 2-3 years later, people are talking about it." So, I got an opportunity after I came back from that last deployment, got hired on with Verizon. The great part about that is a guy by the name of Tommy Jones. If Tommy's listening to this, love you, brother. He and I were sitting on a flight going from Washington, D.C. to Fayetteville, and he handed me his business card after we chatted, and he opened the door so that I could get interviewed at Verizon, which really demonstrates the power of the network. Never underestimate where your contacts lie, whether they be on LinkedIn, whether they be your neighbor, your friend, men and women that you served with in the past who've already transitioned out. And so moved from Miami to Dallas, big change there, and loved my time with Verizon. And then subsequently ended up changing over to IBM Cloud, which was really a phenomenal thing. I mean, it's IBM, I mean, what can I say? And now I'm doing the consulting thing with a great local outfit called Improving Enterprises. And I'm a consultant who also serves as a Scrum Master for an energy sector client headquartered in Canada. And so I get to work remotely from home, coaching teams and helping them improve their processes, and hopefully getting the outcomes that they desire, as far as the build out of some complex systems to make their work more efficient. And thoroughly love it. And having this dual career was really, I think it was the best unplanned career I could have ever hoped for.
Yeah, it's funny because I was talking to someone this week about the military reserves, specifically the Army reserves, and the benefits of going into the National Guard reserves versus going active duty, and how you can have that dual career taking off almost at the same time. But your story is exactly what I love to hear. And that's exactly what I'm talking about with true leadership, making sure that you utilize your military career to help elevate your your personal career or your civilian career, and fully taking advantage of that, Tim. And that's why you're on the Morning Formation podcast, because we like to hear those types of stories. And you mentioned networking, and that's such a very important part when it comes to the overall career advancement and linking up with folks that can really help you elevate. And that's been something that I've emphasized to our community as well. Would you mind going a tier or two deeper into the importance of networking based off your own experiences, like you just mentioned?
Sure. I think the best example I've got is how I ended up where I am today at Improving. One of the big things that I realized when I moved up here was that as a data center manager, and I was really responsible for data center operations throughout the state of Texas, so multi-site. I threw myself into the work, and I really didn't spend enough time developing local contacts in the community, and being very focused on that, and knowing that, hey, it's Verizon, and it's a great company, and I saw some career longevity. What I didn't see, though, was that they were pivoting their business. And so after, I think it was almost 4 years, Verizon sold its commercial data center operation. And so it split the physical sites that went to a smaller outfit, and then the managed services that ultimately ended up at IBM. And so, had I been thinking forward and been working on building those external connections to work, I probably would have been in a better position, because when I moved to that smaller outfit, I was a senior manager, and I was one of three. And my dad, who worked for AT&T for 40 years, he had seen so many mergers and acquisitions in his time. He said, "Son, you're on a clock. What can I tell you?" And he was right. And so I became gainfully underemployed, and I tried my hand at, kind of my own thing. Didn't work out nearly as successfully as I had wanted it to. But because I had gotten involved in the Scrum community through a veteran service organization, Allies in Service, I was introduced to Agile for Patriots. And I began developing my network in earnest while I was getting my Scrum training, and going to meetups and connecting with all these they call them user groups, where you've got people who do specific programming languages like Java or Visual Basic or C++, or all this stuff that I have no interest in because I like hardware, but building these relationships and demonstrating that, hey, you know what, I'm here, I'm interested, I want to learn and grow. And so out of that, I started a conversation with Improving. And it was funny, because at the time that I got the job offer at IBM, I was actually declining a job offer from Improving. And I went, okay, this is I'm going to continue to have this conversation with my contacts at Improving. And as I continue to talk and show up at their offices for the user group meetings pre-COVID, I built these great relationships. I got to see the company from the inside out, the quality of people that were there. And after this geo expansion at IBM, I determined, I need to go back and I need to upskill, because I'm in the hardware side of the business for quite a long time. I needed to get back to software. And so always had this ongoing conversation with the people who are now my colleagues after 2 years, and the right client opened up. The timing was right. I was finishing what I did at IBM, and I was like, you know what? Power of the network. Had I not done the right thing the second time around, cultivated those contacts, cultivated those relationships, kept talking about something that in these communities, this is what the interest is, there's no reason any one of us coming out of a uniform shouldn't join a meetup. We should join these communities. If we've got an interest, in data science, go join a data science community. If you've got an interest in, In pure IT, there's pure IT communities, software development. I mean, there are so many different groups that now that most of them are online, you can literally just go jump in a couple of times because they usually meet once a month. See what the crowd's like, ask a few questions. More than likely, they'll have kind of an open connection period. A little bit of socialization either before or after the formal meeting. Learn some cool stuff in the professional area that you want to go into, and connect with folks on LinkedIn and start those types of conversations. I mean, I'm even right now part of a industrial and organizational psychology group that's veterans focused. Teams. Need to understand teams. Need to understand the organization, what the challenges are with change management. I'm still reaching out to new groups of people where I think that I can ask some intelligent questions and really gain some deep learning about things that can inform me as a professional and only make me better. Because outside of the uniform, there is nothing to guide us in our career path. There's nothing that's going to say in the next 3 to 9 months, if you do this, you'll be eligible for promotion. A lot of it is, kind of figure it out as you go. Some companies are better at career path. Other companies are not. I know Verizon was really good. I know that IBM was very good as well. So the smaller outfits, not so much. In fact, improving has now got an improving path that wasn't there 2 years ago. So I know exactly what my path is to vice president and director. But everything about going into the private sector doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be hit and miss. As long as you lean on people that you can develop a relationship with, and get a whole bunch of different angles on where you want to go, that diversity of opinion, because you need to know what the pros and the cons of a given profession are from the people who are doing the work, because assuming, there's a lot of gray area in there. And until you've talked to people, you're not going to know if it's a good fit or feel for you.
That's actually really great advice, Tim. I got out of the Army myself in 2007. And in 2007, there was no LinkedIn. There wasn't a whole lot going on online. It was very difficult to connect with folks. And I think the advice that you just gave to actually go to the meetups, you can inadvertently better understand the culture of a company by speaking to the folks who are part of that company. And then in turn, they can see what you're about and see if you fit that culture. And I think that was one of the things that I struggled with my first job after leaving the military was there were no more cards on the table. There was only one offer, and it was either I take it or I go unemployed. And, that's why I'm here today. I don't want folks to make that same mistake. And it's, I really want to reach back and have our military community start doing the legwork, start preparing for that career transition. So that is some awesome advice that you talked about. And then also you mentioned too, your resiliency, that you had tried different things and some things didn't work, but then you kept going. And, a lot of folks in the military don't realize it, but that's what we're taught to do. Like we're taught to be resilient. We're taught to, drive on. Right. And
yeah,
for some reason, when we get out into the civilian world, we just kind of lose that. And, but that's really, truly who we are, as military service members. And, you brought some really great things today, Tim, but for anyone out there who's listening to this podcast and they want to follow up with you on anything that you mentioned today, how can they connect with you or follow up with you at anything that you might have talked about here on the show?
Hey, connect with me on LinkedIn. Tim Dickey, all one. I don't have any special characters or crazy numbers after me. Look for the bald guy with the glasses and the beard, and you'll know who I am. And also, I've got my own personal blog, timdickey.com. And so if you want to read more about what I'm doing and what I'm experiencing in that space of Scrum and agile, as far as product and service development, come take a read. I try to cross post to LinkedIn every weekend. So the post actually drops on Saturday morning on my blog, and then I usually repost it a little bit later on Saturday or first thing Sunday morning. And I am always happy to have conversations with veterans, and military spouses as well, because that mil spouses are also a big part of the community. We can't do it without them. And I'll tell you, my wife married into this thing, and I look at it and I clearly married up because she handled the house in a fantastic fashion when our daughters were small, and I'm just, man, this was great. Thank you, God. So I like what you said, KP, which is we're out here, we're doing this to help other people in their path be a little bit smoother than our own, and it really is about giving. And I think that that is the core of what we do and why we wear the uniform. And I love the fact that we can talk about it, and you and I admit mistakes were made, we learned, and now we're sharing it so that somebody else can do better.
Yeah, that's the one thing is, so many people are hard on themselves when they make mistakes. And I've always told soldiers in times past, whenever I was in leadership, was, this particular mistake that you made or this event doesn't define you as a person. And what's going to define you is where you end up in the very end. So you got to keep going. You got to keep trudging on and elevating yourself and being the person that you want to be and that you believe yourself to be as well. And some of the things that you mentioned today, man, really resonate with me when it comes to just overall the technical side of Scrum to your own military career as well. And I really appreciate you being on the show today. And before we final things out, Tim, is there anything that you'd like to summarize or provide additional advice to our listeners?
Sure. I would think that, reflecting back on my career, if somebody had been able to give me some wise counsel in advance of, winding things down, I would say, it's okay not to know what you want to be when you grow up. It's okay to experience different things professionally. Don't doubt your ability to adapt. And from the standpoint of pivoting, always pivot to something that you're interested in. Don't just take a job for the sake of taking a job. You may have to. I mean, and I'm not discounting that. I mean, there are certain times where you're just going to have to do it. But there are so many different ways to acquire skills and knowledge and experience. There's, the horizon is very wide open. We as service members have been taught to be mentally tough. Like you said, we are resilient. We walk in with a really great toolbox. The challenge is adapting those stories and those tools in that toolbox to fit a different context, a different type of work. And so, talking with folks, within the military community, as well as people who have deep private sector experience and are out there helping and supporting the veterans community, man, if you don't tap into it, you're kind of passing up one of the best resources you'll ever have. There's plenty of VSOs out there, veteran service organizations. It's just a question of reaching out. And to your point, TAP today is very different than TAP, 10, 15 years ago, even 5 years ago. And I know that a lot of time, energy, and effort has been put into making transition better for veterans. And it's just simply reaching out to somebody and starting to ask those questions, and ask the questions of yourself too. There's no wrong answer for the transition. There's no wrong answer for figuring out what the next step is in either starting a new career or transitioning into a complementary career. It is just simply a matter of being humble enough to say, I don't know, but I know how to find out, and I'm going to start asking some folks.
Very, very wise advice. And I think to summarize that, invest in yourself, make sure that you keep moving forward. And when I say invest in yourself, that means while you're in service, make sure you go to the education center, make sure you start figuring out like what is available to me for me to do on those Fridays and Saturday nights when, there's nothing better to do in the barracks. And well, there is, but at the end of the day, probably not very good things. that would just waste your time. I mean, at the end of your 4 years or whatever your commitment is, whatever you decide to do, you definitely want to look back and say, you know what, I accomplished this. And Tim, I really appreciate you being on the show today. I will make sure that I put all the links that you sent me as far as things dealing with Scrum, as well as your website down in the show notes. So if you're listening to this and you want to follow up with Tim, to include his LinkedIn, all that will be down in the show notes. Make sure you connect with him, add him to your network. He is a very open individual when it comes to dialogue and asking questions. And he's one of the many great people in our military community reaching back and looking to help our community level up overall, because we know how it was getting out, and we've seen other people getting out of the military making that transition, and it's quite a climb sometimes. So we're still here. Just because you're not wearing the uniform anymore doesn't mean that you still don't coach and mentor and help out each other. So Tim, thank you for joining us on the Morning Formation. I appreciate it.
Hey, pleasure's all mine, KP. Take care.
And for everyone else out there listening, I want you to stay tuned, stay focused, and stay motivated. Warriors, fall out. You've been listening to the Morning Formation Podcast. I hope you found today's materials helpful and of value to your current situation. You can connect with me on Instagram at the_morning_formation_podcast, or you can connect with me via email at theformationpodcaster@gmail.com. Also, I would like to thank my partners at Act Now Education for their support. Authenticity, community, and trusted is what you can expect from all members of the Act Now Education team. You can link up with them today and learn about some new, free educational resources on their Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or at their website, actnoweducation.com. Whether today's show took you back to a nostalgic time or helped you think about tomorrow, thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you again. Stay safe and stay motivated. Warriors, fall out.